Welcome back, everybody. Haha, microphone. Ha! Well, hello. Welcome back, everybody. I am very excited to be able to introduce our next two speakers. I have just this quick story to tell you. So it had to have been about 4 years ago. I was standing right over there, and my friend Doug got up on stage for the very first time, guitar in hand, singing out his heart, and just like you, it was crazy because his like heart just like exploded right with his voice, and it was like, whoa. That's awesome. Not only is he like this incredibly kind, compassionate man, but he's also not afraid to take leaps into things that might scare him or he hasn't done. So I've gotten this opportunity over the last 4 to 5 years of watching Doug grow into this incredible human being. I mean, I knew he was incredible before, but just in this ever unfoldment. And then he brought Sarah into my life, and I was like, and that was like a double wow. That was like, wow. And Sarah, and getting to know Sarah and this incredible way that she holds herself, and she has worked with children, and she works with families. And the more Doug was telling me, all I could think was like, Doug, thank you for bringing such a cool person into our community. When we started talking about leadership and what do we want to bring to the plate, Doug and Sarah were like, we can do that. And I was so excited because they're two people who I think have really worked hard to be who they are and have done it in a very authentic way, and being able to really speak a language that can really connect with all of us in a very heart space and a very practical space. So I'm going to stop gushing. I'm really in a gushing space today. So, and I would just like to introduce Sarah Mace and Doug Wolf to the stage.
So as Sarah said, my name is Sarah, and one of the things that I thought it would be good for you to know about me is that I have a passion for leadership, and I've started in leadership positions since I was pretty, my early 20s, basically. I went to work at a child care program, and as an administrative assistant, I knew nothing about what I now know is called early childhood education, such a basic level of that. I didn't even know what it was called. And in about 6 to 8 months, I was actually running the school. I had started taking classes, and now I teach classes for child care providers, and I've worked with families from very, very low-income families trying to remake their lives as they're in recovery from drugs and alcohol, to families on the upper end of the spectrum. I currently work at a Montessori school that the tuitions are pretty high, and so we've got this range of people that I have worked with. And when you're talking about working with children and families, that's a very, that's a place where you can make a lot of difference. And so I pray every day that the work that I do makes a difference in the lives of our communities and our families. Oh, one last thing. Where I got a lot of my leadership education was from the Leadership Institute of Seattle, which at that time was in Bastyr University. And the thing that I really loved about that program is it taught me that leadership is an inside job. Okay? Leadership is developing yourself from within. It's not learning about a lot of techniques or a lot of ways to manipulate people or get them to do what you want. It's about your heart, as Judith talked, and it's about your being and the way that you walk in the world. So, and Doug?
Should I just use this one? Sure. And I'm Doug, and I like to play music and sing. But I also been in this area for a long time, and started out as a team leader, and I've been in a lot of different management positions in a lot of different companies just in this area. And then about 10 years ago, I started my own company, and I had to just manage me, and that was the hardest part, So I've been an independent consultant for the past 10 years, working for a lot of the same companies around here. And just recently, I accepted a full-time position at a Sound Transit as a business systems analyst, right? And so I'm trying to make big changes there, you know. So my background comes more from a business and a corporate side. You know, I've seen a lot of dysfunctional leaders, how they do dysfunction through the organization, and it's that male ego out of balance with the feminine is totally exactly what it is. And so that's sort of my mission in life. I want to see if I can get these CEOs to maybe crack their hearts open a little bit, and that, I think that will make a big change in the world. That's sort of my mission in life. So, true leadership in action, for me, creates hope. There is no hope without action, just like abandon hope, embrace action, because without action, there is no hope. And so I love that slide you got.
Okay. Okay, let's go on to the next.
Okay.
So we're going to start just at the very beginning about kind of our ideas about leadership. Because up until the really recently, the 19th century, people believed that leaders were born, not made. And so if you came from the right parents, if you had the right blood in your veins, then you were fit to be a leader. However, that's probably some of how we got here today. So there's currently still leaders on the planet who are considered born leaders because they've come into their leadership through who their parents are, or maybe even how much money they have. So let's just look at a few. Okay, so a few that fall in that category. So up on the upper right, and I hope I say his name right, he's King Motsoaledi III. Thank you.
On the side.
Yes. And he's the king of Swaziland, in case you didn't know that. And he is a head of the royal Swazi family. So he actually inherited, he was a beneficiary of two funds that were created by his father in trust for the Swazi nation. However, really pretty much what he's known for using that for is to buy palaces for each of his 13 wives and send them on worldwide shopping sprees. So leaders do make a difference. Sometimes it's in what they, can you imagine if that was used in another fashion to help this country that is known to be one of the poorest on the globe? He also, he wanted to curb the AIDS epidemic, and his idea of doing that was to invoke an ancient chastity rite which bans women under the age of 18 from having sex. So, who the leader is, especially of large groups of people, affects other people in big ways. The leader over here in the corner, anybody know who that is? He's from, give you a hint, yes?
He's from Thailand.
Oh my goodness, yes, how did you know that? Does he look like he could be from Thailand? Very good. You read my presentation. It's King Bhumibol, and he is the monarch of Thailand. He's also the richest royal in the world for 3 years in a row. He's worth about $35 billion. And despite his country's riots and turmoil, he still maintains that personal wealth. He's also, if you criticize this nice-looking man, you could end up in jail for either 3 to 15 years. So some of the ways in which he leads. Oftentimes it is through fear. Different sort of heart-centered leadership. Over in the corner over here, does anybody know who that is? You gotta. You live in America, right? Kim Kardashian, not necessarily a royal in the same right, but an American royal, right? I mean, she made $6 billion on a reality TV show.
And she signed up for one of those things.
Yeah! And she has 10 million followers on Twitter. 10 million followers. Isn't that crazy? And it's all because we worship royalty and we want to know every single detail. In general, maybe not the people here. You may not be on our Twitter list, but in general, we want to know details in our culture about the lives of people who are born into this sort of wealth and royalty. Her dad, by the way, is Robert Kardashian, who is a lawyer and a businessman who went back into being a lawyer because his close friend, O.J. Simpson, was charged with murder. So that's her dad. Over on this side, last leader we're going to mention, just in terms of all of these born leaders, Kim Jong-un. His father just passed away, making him a leader at 29 years old in a country that we don't get a lot of information about because it's so controlled by the propagandist media. So he's a pretty unpredictable leader at this point, and the relations between Japan and North Korea have been a little edgy since North Korea kidnapped some Japanese people back in the 70s and 80s, and so they haven't had real good relations, but they're only 800 miles apart, with Kim Jong-un having the control of a nuclear arsenal. So, there's different things within this concept of leadership and born leadership, and how we use power and how it affects people.
So I'm going to talk about the positional leadership types. That's in the corporation. So you have CEOs all the way from, your Taco Bell managers, right? They all affect people. I mean, I know young kids who work for Taco Bell managers who are 20 years old, and they don't really know what they're doing. They're still like, running from their egos. So,
Doug, you might want to speak into the microphone.
oh yeah, so sorry.
And then you can just pop it out if you want.
I can just pop it out if I want.
Good idea.
So these are the different types of leaderships and the positions. You have individuals, and individuals do have some influence. Teams have influence, managers, executives, all the way up to CEOs and world leaders. And then as you go up this ladder, you have more effect on the number of people's lives. So that's just a fact. An individual is going to have less effect on the world than teams, managers are effect. However, in our today's world, I like to mention, with the internet and to be able to blog. I mean, Roya right here, she did her first blog, and she got like over 200 responses.
400,
Well,
right?
I got 500 recommends. Wow. And 200 comments.
And which one was that on? That was on your.
It was the response to the Republican response to the State of the Union. So
Yeah,
I
so it's-
responded to the Republican response.
And it was a 17-year-old girl responds to the Republican, and she just killed it, and people just loved it, and she's going to be the next world leader, and, which, I mean, honestly, she can do it actually. So that's an example of, in today's world, an individual can, through our internet, we can make a huge difference. Inside teams, we can make communities, regions, nations, in the world. So the main point is here is in the corporate world, when you're up here, you affect a lot of people, a lot of people's lives, you control how stressed they are, how much they work. They can work 60 hours a week, never see their families, and that's where we want to get away from my point of view.
And yet there's another type of leader that we call the reluctant leader. And these are leaders who don't necessarily seek to become leaders on their own, and they sort of get brought into the spotlight in different ways. And there's also what we call the uncharismatic leader. And as Seth Godin says, he's a leadership author, you don't need to be charismatic to be a leader. So if that's not you, don't worry about it, right? Going into leadership will give you charisma, like Kurt Cobain. We'll talk about him in a second. But let's first talk about Corazon Aquino. Corazon Aquino is a self-proclaimed plain housewife, but she also became the 11th president of the Philippines and one of the first women to hold an office in Philippine history. And that was because her husband, Benigno Aquino, he was a staunch critic of President Ferdinand Marcos, the then President Ferdinand Marcos, and because of that, he was assassinated. And upon his assassination, that's when Corina came into power. And she's considered an icon of democracy, and she was titled by Time magazine in 1986 as Woman of the Year. So she's one of our reluctant leaders. There's also Angela Merkel. German counselor, Chancellor of Germany, and she's the chairwoman of the Christian Democratic Union, the CDU. She's also the first female chancellor of Germany, and as Judith said, there is a rise in that change of power. We're seeing more women in power, and she is not necessarily known to be charismatic, but she also is basically the de facto leader of the EU. So she's come into that position from her authentic place. And then, of course, Kurt Cobain. Has anybody heard of him? He basically has been credited with as being the spokesperson for Generation X, you know, with Nirvana and his music. And they've sold 25 million albums worldwide since Nirvana has, with over 50 million worldwide. I'm sorry, 25 million albums in the United States, 50 million worldwide. However, he was always very uncomfortable with his fame. And that's part of what seemed to have kind of done him in, right? Because he struggled with depression and, you know, heroin addiction and all of that. But he was definitely a very reluctant leader, but a leader nonetheless, singing his songs about the truth of his experience as a young man growing up in Aberdeen, Washington. Okay. So what do these people have in common?
They've all made a big difference in a lot of people's lives. And making a big difference isn't always a good thing, you know. So I like to think I make a big difference, you know, and he does, right? But it's not really the, you know, a lot of people have made a big difference in our lives and in this world, and it has not been a good thing. Unless you happen to be a skinny guy wearing a loincloth and kicking some ass. So now this guy made a big difference in the world, and he's scary.
And what we want to make sure that you understand, even as we talk about some of these world leaders and how they shape our world, and whether or not that world is going in the direction about the things that really matter and care to you, is that every person has leadership potential. And that's the new thinking around leadership now. It's not that leaders are born, it's that leaders are people who come from their heart and take action to make a difference in the world in ways that matter to them and to others that follow.
So what's the difference between this guy and this guy? And I seem to think it's fear and love. And so for another little graph, so I kind of termed it open heart. It can be authentic leadership. You know, there's like in Good to Great, they talk about level 5 leadership, and like books like Leadership and Self-Deception, which is a great book. You know, they talk about being out of the box leader, you know, and all of those things mean to me is you're just operating from a heart open space. So just like in a corporate leaders, the more open your heart are, the more people's lives you affect positively, not negatively. So if you're a CEO of a major corporation, you can affect a lot of people's lives in a positive way, not the negative way that happens now. So that's what I'm trying to say there. So what are some of the behaviors of open-hearted leaders? You talked about a lot.
Lipstick?
Lipstick, there we go.
Right, I totally agree. So you know, I've worked for a company or with a company just right down the street here, a great local company, but you know, they'll eventually probably not make it because there's just such dysfunction. And honestly, I know we talk about the guy and the goddess. It really is. That is the issue. It's like the male and the feminine are out of balance, and men are just running the world amok, and it's crazy. And so I work with Sound Transit now, and the CEO is Joni Earl, and she's doing a great job. Most of the women in the majority of the women in high leadership positions are women in this company, you know, and you can just see she has meetings every 2 weeks with all staff. She comes from her heart. She sent out an email several weeks ago promoting her daughter's, her stepdaughter's thing at the Triple Door. And then, you know, the week later, someone called her on that, and she apologized, saying, you know, probably wasn't following my rules. You know, just because I'm the CEO, people might have just, you know, rather than calling me on it. And she thanked the anonymous person who called her on that, you know. And so I just replied, I go, you're such a great leader, you know, because like leaders need to make, I mean, when you make mistakes, and that's the humanness that you were talking about. I loved everything you said. And so that's one thing. Now, for me, like, yeah, sure, yeah. So I think like when I start, okay, I'm gonna, like the top 3, it's like great leaders, they are open heart leaders. They spend a lot of time looking in the mirror. You know, I pop this one up, and like so many times as leaders, you know, we might think we're a pussycat, but we're really a lion, and we need to own that lion, and we really need to do it. And then a lot of times, or probably more times, you know, we turn away from the truth of our darkness. You know, we all have our darkness. We all have, and it's trying to find the balance of that. I've been going through that kind of work the past 2 weeks so hard on finding, I mean, you know, because like, so as a man in this world, you know, sometimes we can go to the opposite of the feminine to try to counteract the masculine, right? And we got to find that balance, you know, too. You know, so you know, you got to be able, like, I have to find my lion, which I did a few days ago, and you know, and I had to go into some really hard, dark stuff inside myself to get to that, you know, and so that's hard, and that's what a lot of leaders won't do. The ones that are around this company, you know, I ask them, they go, what's it going to take to change our company? I go, well, it's going to take like this guy and this guy to actually begin to look at themselves and going, you know, the way I've always done this isn't going to work anymore. This control, this ego. I go, do you think they're going to do that? No. You know, Dave's not going to go explore his inner self and open his heart and see if there's a different way than the power and control, and bam, if you can't do it, I'll find someone else who can, right? So, I mean, and there's a bit of, and so in that whole organization, it drives learned hopelessness. You know, people try to make a difference, but you just get killed, so you end up just coming in, doing your job, getting out, just try not to make any waves, and just get your paycheck, and just living with the hopelessness actually is what that is.
And I just want to say, and it's also another thing that points out how we need more leaders with heart in these positions, and it's coming.
And that's
And
my
it's coming.
mission. I've decided.
Okay, another thing.
Yeah, and so another thing too is
Heart
they
leaders.
like people and relate to people on all levels. You know, you know how many times we see God, you know, like you were saying, you know, you can say the right thing, you know, you're all polished, you know the right things to say, but it's not really in your heart. You know, it's just, you're just trying to learn the last effective, you know, team meeting building thing from the last time. It's not that you really like people and you relate to people and you're able to actually be honest with people. Anything else you want to say on that?
No, not in the
Like in the
moment.
book, leadership, in the book Leadership and Self-Deception, they talk about that, treating people as people.
Oh,
You know, and when you treat people as people, you can, and value diversity, you know, so treat people as people, value diversity.
well, let me just say on the treat people as people, since you
We
asked me,
can't
it
go-
just
oh,
took
yeah,
me
we
a
can.
minute to
Yeah,
kind of
sorry.
connect back in with that. But I think what happens, you know, kind of in human behavior in general, and in management and in leadership, is there gets to be a place where people often look at others as objects. It's not intentional, but that's the dynamic that occurs, so that they look at people as resources, or they look at people as either doing or not doing what they think serves. But that is the dehumanizing part of it. So when, as leaders, we can truly look at other people as people and understand that they have needs, wants, and desires, that we can help facilitate them in fulfilling when we are heart-centered leaders. You know, we all can have our needs, wants, and desires in the mix.
And you actually have better employees who work harder, they're more creative, and you can actually, you know, make more money this way too. You know, so the bottom line would just be a result of just good, it's not the end. And so the last kind of thing, they can make tough decisions thoughtfully and in the best interest of all people in our planet. You know, so whenever you're able to look at yourself, whenever you treat people and you hear people's stories, and they can argue with you, you can have debates, you can have fierce debates. That's what it talks about in Good to Great. You know, you can have fierce debates, but in the end, everyone is heard, everyone has their voice, and then at the end, the leader needs to make a decision. But we know that decision is made from all of our inputs. The ego is gone. You know, it's more of just what is the best for all of us. And you can still make a mistake, right? So in that way, more people are willing to support their decisions. So whenever you do that, your success of even your decisions, because I mean, I've certainly been, you know, a part of, you know, you got some guy, he's like just tries to cram things down you. So you do the passive reactive and try to do whatever you can to make sure his stuff doesn't work right. You know, you know. You know, or you're just like, you know what? Like, you know, he's made his decision, you know, it's like, but, you know, I'm not going to say anything. If it's going to go the wrong way, it's going to go the wrong way. Because he doesn't care about me, I don't really care about them, and he'll just kill me if I say something anyway. So it will take truthful, and I think I like authentic. I just made that up last night. Truthful, effective leaders to make the big changes needed in the world now.
Okay, so again, we're back at open-hearted leadership. And that just means guiding a group of people toward a shared vision that promotes a joyful world. And we want you to just think about the possibilities as you develop yourself in those ways and in your own leadership. And as Judah said, what matters to you? What matters to you and your tribe? Is it about buying local so that we're not supporting agribusiness? That is not a good habit to be in. Is it standing up against corporate greed, like in the Occupy movement? Which, by the way, does anybody know where that Occupy movement started? You're familiar all with that, right? So where did that, do you know how that started? Adbusters, yes. Adbusters, a Canadian-based magazine that is commercial-free, not commercial, that'd be ad-free, type of magazine. They started that in 2010, and it's really caught on. And the things that one of their slogans is the 1%, or the 99%, excuse me, and the 99% is all of us, and the 1% is where the concentration of wealth is in the world. Okay? And the 1%, and it's the way that it operates is what has brought upon the financial crisis, and how they're handling it, how it's being handled in the after effects tends, so far, it looks like it's mostly benefiting the 1%, and the rest of us are the ones paying. Or Michael Franti, what matters to him? I bet a few of you around here may have heard of him. Social activist, singer, songwriter. He went to Iraq and Afghanistan and Palestine because he wanted to see firsthand the human effects of the war, because he got very frustrated listening to the news and the politicians and talking about the cost of the war when they weren't actually ever talking about the human costs of the war. So armed only with his guitar, he bought a plane ticket and went to these places. And a lot of his songs since have come from that experience. Social justice. And then one of my favorite leaders.
It's my favorite leader.
No, it's my favorite leader.
Actually, mine.
No,
Yours?
it was mine first.
Our very own.
Clint McClune.
And
he's made a huge difference on my life. I mean, so if I have to pick a god, you know, I pick Clint. You know, when
which might be why he chose you to talk up here.
yeah, that could be. But I mean, Clint inspires people, just, kids, everybody that comes to this stage, he welcomes people. He welcomed me. My first time I ever was up here was singing, and I never would have done that if it wasn't for Clint and his inspiration and this whole bookstore and this community here. And so there's totally a great leader right there. he's I mean, and just to see him grow too, like in the past 4 years. I mean, now he's like he's working. He's got to go talk to the mayor next week of Redmond. He's the chairman of the Arts Council of Redmond, and he's just this crazy hippie freak dude, And so just speaking his truth, and the truth works, So it's so cool.
So I just want to ask one more time, what matters to you and the tribes that you're a part of? And think about that as we ask this next question. We'll wait for the machine back there while you think. Good enough? Okay. So, what's holding you back from taking leadership? What's holding you back from taking actions that are going to make a difference in the lives of other people on the planet, about things you care about and the things you love? Got some ideas? What holds you back? Anybody want to say?
Stories that we tell ourselves.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit about the stories?
I'll give you an example, a vulnerable example.
Thank you.
In the group, in the tribe that I have found my freedom in, that I have found myself in, I'm finding it difficult to leave them. But the stories that I tell myself is that I have to leave them or have to be with them. Like, it's just a story.
Like there's only those options.
Yeah, like there's only those options. It's just a story. The truth is I just stay true to myself. And the comings and goings become irrelevant. But if I keep telling myself there's a right way or a wrong way to do it, I'm stuck.
Yes. So those stories we tell ourselves, our beliefs, the things that we think are the right way or the wrong way or the expected way. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for anybody else?
I think a lot of times, like I know I feel this way, and I think a lot of other people do, is just feeling too small for such big problems. And also, I think the world and like society still has the mindset about being born into leadership, and if you're not born into some place that already has power for you, it's hard to gain that power. And I think a lot of people, including myself, feel held back by that. If you're not Kim Kardashian or Kim Jong-il or his son or whatever, how can you start making a difference? And what happens when people don't respond to you right away? So I think that can be a big.
And it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
The number.
That's amazing. I just got something really massive out of that about money. People say, oh, well, I wasn't born into money, so I can't live my dreams. Or I can't. That was really
Nice,
powerful.
nice. Look at all these connections being made. This is great. Just on that simple question, what's holding you back? Right. Well, Margaret Wheatley, have you heard of her? She's an author. She has something that we put in here about some of the things that hold us back. And she talks about the silence, us getting into the fog of silence. And she said, why is silence moving like a fog across the planet? Why is it growing in us as individuals, even as we learn of more and more issues that concern us? Why do we fail to raise our voice on behalf of things that trouble us and then regret what we didn't do? As I've watched the silence grow in myself and others, I've noticed a few reasons for the silence, but none of these are entirely sufficient as explanations. So don't let yourself fall into the fog of silence. Speak your truth. As Catherine of Siena says, speak the truth in a million voices, because it's silence that kills. So we wanted to have you, we're going to go on a break here in a minute. We're just about the end of this segment. We have kind of 2 segments here. So as we go on this break, I would love if you as this wonderful group that you are, take an opportunity to talk with somebody next to you, talk with somebody here about some of the things that matter to you most. And as you think and talk about those things that matter to you most that you'd like to make a difference in, the way to get out of overwhelm is to think of one small step that you could make tomorrow that would make a difference on your path towards that. So as we take this break,
Can I give a quick example?
yeah,
So
thank you.
it's sound transit, right? I want to make a difference in the whole government. So this is hard, right? You know, because this is my first ever public sector type of a business that I've ever been in, right? It's always been private. And so what I'm noticing is we can't have very effective meetings. You know, our meetings, you know, people are scattered all around. So the solution is let's just have smaller people in our meetings because we can't, you know. And just last week I go, the reason we can't have more people in the meetings, because sometimes it's useful to have more people, is just that we don't know how to have, you know, structured meetings and people stay on topic. You know, so I'm kind of committed. You know, I talk to the HR lady. I go, because I'm managing a little team right now, and say, can you do a training for our team, just a 45-minute training on how to have a proper meeting, you know? And you know, and I'm telling our team, because I want to change the whole government, but we'll start right here with our little team, and then I'm going to talk to our, you know, our finance and information technology chief, you know, and try to plant that seed of let's just try to focus on one thing, simple thing. Let's just try to have meetings, you know, and I think we could increase the amount of, you know, productiveness that we get things done. People can leave a meeting feeling good, feeling like something happened. You know, we'll be saving taxpayers money. We'll be making a difference in the world, you know, by just a simple thing like let's just try to have meetings, you know, on time when there's a whole lot of things to work on. But
Yeah. And I could just add that, you know, in my work, I just happen to, what was that phrase you said? Something about people don't do stuff to you, they do stuff for you. So I happen to have a coworker that is very different the way that her time clock works than my time clock. I'm up early in the morning. She's very groggy in the morning. She tends to be more productive late after we close. So I'm kind of this got to get things done person, especially we've been one admin person down. So some of those differences have become very irritating to me over the last 3 months when there's been a lot of stress and I haven't been at my best. And so the one thing that I want to do is I want to go into each day trying to be more patient with our humanness and our differences and look at it from that perspective instead of I'm right and she's wrong. So just a couple of ideas, couple of examples. Thank you for listening. We'll see you after the break. Oh, but one last thing. Oops, I'm a little ahead. We do have one last slide from Anne Frank, which is how wonderful is that nobody needs to wait a single minute before starting to improve the world. We can do it now. And now's our break. Thank you. See you back in a minute.
so where are you from?
From Sydney in Australia.
So what about around here? How long have you been here?
I've only been here about a month.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was in LA for about 10 days of that month. I've got like a big hall here. I'm staying with a friend. That's all the technical story like that. But really, it's a calling that brought me here.
guys, what group are you in? Well, I'm not really, I'm a group of trees. And like now, they're trying to close down certain things at the city, and so I started to go into some of the meetings in the evenings, you know, and I started getting phone calls. Now I'm on the task force, and I had my first meeting. I was on the 50th floor in this one place. I looked at the Union Station where my office is, and I'm, whoa, this is crazy. You know, but it's like, it's just happening, and I want to embrace it. Right? Why not?
You created it.
Well, it created me,
Well,
actually. Yeah, but
it's the same thing.
well, actually, the opportunity opened up and she chose to step into it, right? It was really what it was.
You said yes.
Right. And that was since decades. You're doing that.
I guess this is what I'm doing.
I don't even really have a choice.
I'm one of the East Siders that I did for a while. Oh, you did? I did for a while for just like years or so, and then I realized I'm not a morning person, and the distance was killing me. And then there's full hash, and then the recession and the gas on here. It's only one time a month. I just like I can't handle that. I can do that one time a month, then I'm away for the weekend.
Sure, so
You know,
I do it every day.
go more. Anyway, but now but I've been going to Center for Spiritual Living more regularly lately, and it's still it's
I go into my backyard. I go into my backyard a lot, you know.
yeah.
I live right in Woodville, you know, we're right on the pipeline trail. So, you know, I do lots of night running and stuff. And, just the other night I had a night run, you know. I bring my salon along with me just in case, you know.
The naked girl is always better than a well-dressed lie. I know.
It's like family. I worship it. I use it. It's like, it's just sort of, I grew up in Kentucky, you know, so
You know, the meetup.com. Meetup.com. There is every group you can imagine is out there. And all you have to do is find it. And they're all over the east side. I mean, we may not have, just like on the east side, but there are these little groups. Anything and anything. Activity. They're just doing. Yeah. Thank you.
So we just sort of don't do this long, probably. Yeah.
Linear there.
All right.
You're in control. You're in control.
Yeah, I'm in control. Whatever she said.
Whatever she said.
Yeah, see, that's why, like, with the, like, I think it should be 50-50, but not really, it should be
It's
49,
100.
no, 49-51, right? So the woman should have, like.
Yeah, I was like, who's 51? Yeah, right. No, you're supposed to take turns.
Figure this shit out.
I still take turns. Instead of 100. Wow.
All right, looks like we're going to start again. Are you all ready? Okay, cool.
All right.
Do you like this? I love community. Let's figure this shit out together. So only we can do this, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's
Right.
not just either one of us, you know, but we have to do it. And I love humanity, and I'd like to figure it out.
Yeah. And I'm wondering a little bit, as we had, there was kind of a little bit of a assignment, I guess, on the break. Hate to say it that way. I guess I teach preschool teachers too much. But I am wondering if there were some thoughts, ideas, comments that came from some of the questions we posed and stuff that you guys thought about as we were on a break. Is there,
What was the question again?
So good. Thank you for asking. Let me see. No, the question is, what are the things you'd like to make a difference in, and what's a small step you can take tomorrow to do that? And I know there were a couple other comments even about like what holds us back that was I heard floating around. Okay. Young woman in the ponytail.
I talked to Janet Marie, and we had a discussion. I started by saying, like what really matters to you, and she said, the women's movement that she is seeing the pattern towards. But instead of talking about specifically what we could do tomorrow, she sort of told me about our idea of, energies, the things that make the biggest difference are when you channel your strongest energy into something. People gravitate towards the larger energies of things,
Nice.
like if you're really feeling something and feeling passionate, and instead of like shutting yourself down, like find a way to express it or do something, and like when the energy is channeled into something, people will gravitate towards that instead
Nice.
of feeling in it, whatever it is.
Yeah. And as a leader, you don't have to come up with an original idea and get a whole bunch of people to follow you. You follow the energy. There's already a whole lot of people out there interested in some of the same things you are. Find them and connect them into tribes, like we have here. Right?
One of the things that holds us back, of course, is fear. And fear of what other people think, fear of being different, fear of going against the, the norm. And, but then that courage kind of steps in when we realize we can't be quiet anymore. We can't be silent anymore.
Nice. And that saying about the bud, the rosebud that, finally had to open because, they couldn't stay in its as a seed anymore. It was too painful to stay all wound up, that it was its time to bloom. And we all have our times to bloom. And that kind of does, yeah.
There's, so there was one other thing that I kind of committed to myself I'm going to speak up around. And so it was Black History Month. I don't know if it was everywhere, but it was at Sound Transit, and a few Fridays ago, there was a panel of 3 Black people, and they told their stories, and like part of the things we talked about is just talking about these things, right? And so, I noticed that, like sometimes we might be someplace, there might be some racial joke or something going on, and I'll just kind of keep silent and go, that's not really very good, But like I've kind of committed to where when that happens, I'm going to say something. That's all.
Nice. Tomorrow. So we have this passion, and we have this drive, and we have this calling to do a particular thing, or to speak in a particular way, or to give voice to our authentic self and thoughts and beliefs. But then, it isn't the rose garden that you might think. Right, Judith?
I beg your pardon, we didn't promise you a rose garden.
Yeah, so we're not here to promise anybody a rose garden. Just because you step into your leadership doesn't mean it's riding off into the sunset here on out. There are going to be warning signs. There's going to be overwhelm with the amount of problems. There's going to be
signs with sharp edges.
Who knew? Who knew? Careful.
I
Caution.
mean, you could get hurt
Yeah.
out there.
So be forewarned. We're going to go into a little of some of those things now and what to do about them. It's not a rose garden. It's more like a labyrinth. And the labyrinth is really leading you to the center of yourself. Because the more that we have self-actualized people who feel their own personal power and their authentic voice and heart, the more the leadership will lead in the directions that we want for the world, a more joyful place for everyone to be. But that journey isn't an easy one. There's dead ends. There's twists and turns that get you off on side roads and that sort of thing. And there is the path towards the center, which is the heart of leadership. However, you got to get comfortable with discomfort. Hate to say that, but it's so important because the only way to the only way to experience your courage is to take action in the face of your fear.
And it is uncomfortable. I mean, so last weekend had a hard time because I was really working hard in that mirror on that dark stuff. So I come in to work on Tuesday morning, and I'm getting kind of irritated because the meetings aren't going on, the person's going on too much, and I start getting irritated with people, and I'm getting kind of short, mostly with one project manager, and the next day I do the same thing, you know, and so he called a one-on-one meeting. Yeah, with us to kind of work through this, and we were able to work through that. You know, he was very. I go, you did such a great job handling me. You know, you know the first thing because I was okay. What are we going to talk? You know, the first thing I wanted to say, I go, Tom, I love you, man. I want to work well together. I want to do this. And he goes, well, I really like working with you, and that's how we started off the conversation, which is really good. You know,
But it wasn't an easy conversation to even start, was
no, you know,
Yeah.
that's like that discomfort, right? You know, and so. But you gotta just do it, you know. I mean, you gotta, and then the next day, there's three of us, so we're kind of like the design team, and so so in the next meeting, the next day after Tom and I kind of talked, John was in the meeting too, and I just kind of turned to Tom again and said, thank you so much for the way that you handled me, and we worked this stuff out, you know, and I was getting irritated, and we talked about ways that we can, you know, because like it's hard to set your boundaries, right? I really needed to be doing something else, not what I was doing right now, right? You know, I can add value to this meeting, but I really need to be adding more value to the things I'm really responsible for. So it's like, how can I let you know that I need to get out of this meeting, and you know, without being abrasive, you know? So we actually had conversations, and that's where I'm trying to bring this into the corporate world, you know, where we actually have open conversations, and then later on another meeting, like the team I'm on is mostly just women, and you know, and I can get triggered at times, you know, and I was letting them know. So I was, you know, I said, you know, I was getting kind of emotional, you know, given this experience, and they go, well, I wouldn't call that emotional. They called it passionate, right? And then I said, and then I kind of just walked out of the meeting. They go, well, that's emotional. So there's passion and there's emotion, and it's all hard to, like, you know, especially if you're trying to be a man in the world and you want to keep your heart open, you want to communicate correctly, not with passive aggressive. I mean, there's so many different ways that we do this stuff, and it's, you know, and I'm you know, I'm looking at my own patterns. I'm seeing my patterns. I'm seeing my patterns in relationships. I'm seeing how my patterns go at work too, and so that's where my discomfort is coming from a lot.
Now looking in the mirror. And on the way here, I said to Doug, so what's more uncomfortable for you? Standing up, teaching a mini little workshop on leadership, or playing your guitar the first time on the SoulFood book stage? And what did you say?
No, you asked me what was harder, that or running up the hill barefooted without any really clothes on.
I forgot. Yeah.
That's
He
kind
does
of
that
what she
too.
said.
Runs
And
up at night, in the dark.
yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And that's easier, right? But
But what was your answer? Your answer was this.
This is
right?
harder, yeah.
This is, you know, like I have done other presentations and I've done trainings and teaching, but Doug really hasn't. And so this is an act of passing through your discomfort, right? Yeah. And so it's
if it wasn't for Clint and his bookstore and playing music and doing that, I wouldn't be able to do this at all right now. So I want to say thanks to everybody here.
So it's uncomfortable standing up in front of a group of strangers, and it's uncomfortable to propose an idea that might fail, and it's uncomfortable to challenge the status quo, and it's uncomfortable to resist the urge to settle and find yourself in that fog, right? But when you do, your discomfort turns into confidence. Your discomfort promotes creativity. Your discomfort overcomes resistance to change. Your discomfort facilitates the achievement of your goals. And that's why it's so important. So the other thing that leaders have, authentic leaders, another trait, is that authentic leaders are curious. Right?
So this is a way to get through your discomfort, right? So whenever you are uncomfortable about something, then just kind of be curious with that discomfort rather than judging it, right? And that's, excuse me?
Avoid.
Or avoiding, right, right. And that also takes the discomfort out because you can a little more objectively.
As well as when you are curious about other people and their behaviors and their reactions, and you hold yourself from a place of curiosity, then you're not in that place that we were talking about before where people become objects. Okay? When you're curious, people stay people, and you stay human, and they stay human. So being curious also points out some things about ourselves, because some of what happens is we are differentiating ourselves. So we have ways of finding out what matters really to us and what we really believe and feel when we're confronted with or up against somebody who has very different ideas and ways and seem to be tearing us down or those sort of things. So in those tough moments, in those uncomfortable moments, remember to be curious, suspend yourself. You know, like we put clothing on a line. Suspend your ideas and your belief, or like we used to put clothing on a line. Maybe they just do that in Europe now. We all have dryers. But, you know, as if you are hanging clothing from a line so that you can look at things from a more objective perspective. And that will help create conversations that help move things forward. And Margaret Wheatley had something to say about this one, too. She said, "I believe that this changing world requires much less certainty and far more curiosity. I believe that the first step in becoming curious is to admit that I'm not succeeding in figuring things out alone. I try to move past the lazy and superficial conversations where I pretend to agree with someone else rather than inquire seriously into their perspective. I try to become a conscious listener, actively listening for differences." She said that very well.
I love Margaret Wheatley.
I love her too. So we're talking about ways that we can get beyond our discomfort. We can go through the labyrinth. We can, those times that aren't the rose garden times. And here's yet another tool on your path. Remembering our shared vision.
Right, so when things are getting tough, when we are getting discouraged, it's that shared vision that we together, we need to help each other remember, right? So why are we here, especially if we're in a tribe, and what the purpose is. So a shared vision is very important too, I think. And never forget to enjoy the journey, because life is not measured by the number of breaths you take, by the number of moments that take your breath away.
So have you ever led through moments of discomfort? What was it like? What was the result?
I was exhausted by the end.
Exhausted by the end.
But exhilarated because I made it through.
Uh-huh.
But I think my adrenaline got so high to get me through it that it was this juxtaposition between exhaustion and exhilaration.
No, what is that? I know that's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then after you got through, I'm just going to guess that there was a little more strength.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was a confidence builder because I knew you could throw me that again. Not that I would want it again, but
That you made it through
I
that.
was able to do it.
Nice. And you stepped out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. Had to.
Had to. Nice.
Forced out of it. It wasn't really a choice.
I was forced out. This is the nightmare. So for someone who's just beginning to present, I flew to Boise to speak two presentations, and I forgot my PowerPoint for both of them on the thumb drive.
Yeah.
And I found that out 20 minutes before
And you made it through.
I did. You probably rocked.
Yes, yay. Anybody else? Examples of leading through your discomfort or something you've done out of your comfort zone that's made a difference? Yes, ma'am?
This isn't like a huge thing, but like one thing is last year I donated blood for the first time, and I'm afraid of needles. Like I make my dad hold my hand when I get shots at the doctor, and I just thought it was like the right thing to do, and so I felt so proud that I was so afraid of needles, and I felt good because like maybe I'm saving one person's life. So.
Nice, nice. And I want to say that, you know, leadership, a lot of times what we do in our society and our culture is we look at these big, grand examples of leadership. And we brought in some big, grand examples too. We're so accustomed to looking at big, grand examples that we fail to remember that those little things can make such a big difference in a person's life and in another person's life. And maybe that act did save someone's life, who knows? But the little things that we do every day and how we touch other people in those moments is huge. Okay, kind of at our last thing here, we have a little parting blessing. So I'm going to read that. May you be blessed with vision in these shadow times. May light invade the darkness. May it be a soft brilliance, as bare as a candle, guiding you through twilight till dawn. And when the dawn breaks, may you find yourself on the threshold of leadership. May you enter and go through, and may you emerge into the dance, a whole and wholly new dance of grace. And may we all.
Is that it?
That's it for me.
Oh.
You go.
Thank you. Is there any, do we want to have any conversations or talk about
Yeah,
anything?
the questions or thoughts or conversation?
Any questions? No?
I just wanted to say how humble you were, both of you, and how it's really put me in my heart space. I actually don't have anything to say, which is really an amazing place to be.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was great.
Thanks.
Oh.
That last blessing was by somebody whose initials at the end said SND. What does that stand for? What do those initials mean?
Oh, what's those?
I don't know.
Well,
There it
can you
is.
Google it?
We'll have to look at, yeah, you want to Google it for us?
Maureen Hilliard. SND.
Sonia's son.
Yeah, yeah, what I've never.
I think I might have gotten that out of a Margaret Wheatley book too, but it's not by her. It's a great book, Leading Our Way, about heart-centered leadership. Any other thoughts or comments?
When you were saying that we get used to hearing about the grandiose movements, but never to forget about the small, everyday things, that was something that Roy and I were talking about as well, that each of us has that opportunity, and if we stand and move mindfully, really stop and think about what we're saying and what we're getting ready to do, and why are we doing it? What's the intention around it? As long as it's important to us and we don't worry about whether we hear back from others that, oh, that was good. It's got to be from in here, and just the action of movement or speaking our truth, that's enough. And just do it. Every day we're dropping a pebble. We may not know how many ripples go out, and we don't know how many people it affects, but it can be amazing. Just simple things. And how you speak to a person, how you look at a person when they're speaking to you, that can be the thing that has made a shift for them that day, and you may not know. But just to keep every day, mindfully moving through the day, I think is one of the biggest things we can do to make a shift.
Yeah, thank you.
And we can do that in every moment. That's the thing. We don't have to wait for anything to do that.
In fact, religious culture, the cradle board was not just about carrying the papoose in the moment. The cradle board was their symbol of mindfully speaking, standing mindfully, speaking mindfully, acting mindfully all the time, because they believed that that vibration was setting up for the next 7 generations. It's a big responsibility in how we speak and act right now.
Thank you.
We follow that thought process, and that really helps me stop sometimes and go, cool, what am I really wanting to say here? If it's going to affect the next 7 generations.
Perfect.
Powerful.
Oh, so.
Thank you.
Okay, so now is a good time to stand, stretch, take a deep breath, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes for our next speaker.
She's never on island time.
So what is it you do?
I'm an interior designer.
Oh, you are? Oh, sweet. How do you
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Especially now as things are recovering.
Yeah, yeah. So you made it through
It's been
okay?
tough. I survived.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Because like that's
I
the kind of
survived.
stuff
That was huge.
that's discretionary income there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I primarily don't, I don't do a lot of